Imagine yourself drifting toward the Alps, not during a time of conquest or winter sport, but in a much quieter age, when villages still clung gently to the earth, when bells chimed softly over farmland, and when the mountains simply watched without rush. You are not standing atop a peak or hiking a trail. But there was a time when cobbled paths wound between stone houses and wheat fields rippled in the cool wind. Families tended goats, and smoke curled upward from modest chimneys. Life here was not grand, but it was full, steady, and rooted in the rhythm of place. The people knew each other's names. They passed through seasons with an intimacy few urban lives now permit, following the snowfall, the melt, the bloom. Instead, you were approaching a placid lake, smooth as glass, nestled among the folds of South Tyrol in northern Italy. The breeze is light, the water still. Its clock face helping farmers time their days, its bell offering a steady rhythm to births, weddings, deaths, a bell that marked life's passages with neither joy nor sorrow, only with presence. A tower with no church, a bell that no longer rings. Tales of travelers caught in storms who were offered shelter in Graun's tavern. And always the sound of the bell returning at the edge of memory, faint, resonant, almost tender. Italy, after the First World War, found itself restructuring borders and identities. A government official's file, a whisper in the pub. But then the measurements were taken. Engineers arrived. Concrete markers were hammered into soil. Letters were posted on doors. And slowly, what had seemed distant began to sink in. South Tyrol, once Austrian, was handed to Italy, trickling through ditches lapping at fences. Then it climbed steadily. Windows drowned, stone walls vanished, trees bent and disappeared. The last to go, as always, was the church. They tried to demolish it, but the steeple was built too well. Stronger than expected, so it was left standing, half submerged, a silent marker of what lay beneath. German speakers, like those in Graun, suddenly found themselves recategorized. The steeple is picturesque, almost storybook in its serenity. And just that one gentle spire above the lake, unchanging, unmoving, rising from a town that still dreams below. But beneath that calm surface, walls remain. Floors remain. Perhaps even furniture tables, beds, bottles on shelves. All beneath the silt, all suspended in silence. The words on maps changed, so did the uniforms of authority. And yet, still the village endured. And in the center of that lake rises something curious, a solitary church steeple. Pale stone reaching toward the sky, its reflection trembling in the hush of early evening, to continue planting onions in a garden you knew would soon lie underwater, to sweep a stoop that would vanish beneath the waves. People pleaded. Petitions were signed. Some villagers packed early, others waited until the last cart. Some hoped the plan might change, but the machinery arrived anyway. This is Lake Resia, and beneath it, a town sleeps. Electricity, modern energy for a modern Italy. A dam, they said, would bring light to cities far beyond this valley. But to build it, they needed water. And to create the lake, they needed land. The kind of land that Graun rested on. They dug channels to carry mountain water downward toward fields and homes. In the spring, snowmelt would trickle along stone canals. Children would follow the flow with sticks and pebbles, inventing games as mothers spread linen to dry. The air would be thick with the smell of damp soil and fresh pine. Bees moved slowly. The days lengthened. The homes, the fields, the church, everything below the planned waterline would disappear. The dialects spoken here were thick with both German and Italian sounds. Street signs bore both languages, and the food, simple, hearty, alpine, was influenced by both regions. Polenta and dumplings, butter and cheese, cured meats and fresh bread, a cuisine of survival and comfort. The village of Graun, once called Graun and Vinchgo, no longer appears on most modern maps, not as it once did. But what remains now above, water is only that bell tower, unmoving in the lake's embrace. Before we dive into how the water came, let's linger in the dry days when the valley still echoed with footsteps. The village of Graun rested along a natural corridor part of the Vinchgo region, where Italy meets Austria and Switzerland in a web of cultural threads. The land was not always easy to cultivate, but the people had learned. They built terraces, they rotated crops, and always the church was there. towering gently above rooftops. The villagers told stories too, not the kind to frighten, but ones to pass long nights. Stories of mountain spirits and quiet ghosts, but memory, as we know, is often what survives when land does not. The 20th century moved differently. Where the village once knew a rhythm of seasons and silence, modernity brought change, and not gently. The greater threat did not arrive as soldiers. It arrived as a plan. Some plans come with ambition, others with necessity. The one that changed Graun came dressed as progress. At first, the idea seemed almost theoretical. The dam was a drawing. This was not a temporary flood. It would not recede. The lake, once formed, would remain. You can imagine how difficult it would be to sit with that knowing. By the summer of 1950, the water had come. It rose slowly at first. Day when the lake freezes in winter, children skate out to the tower. Tourists take photographs in summer. Imagine standing there now. The air cool on your face. The water whispering at the shore. Even now, decades later, the lake carries with it the weight of something more than water. When you walk along its banks, you don't just see a landscape, you sense it. A memory steeped in the stones, in the hush between waves. A quietness that isn't empty, but rather full of what was once here and never truly left. The surface of Lake Resia often glimmers in sunlight, reflecting the pale blue of the alpine sky. But on overcast days, when clouds settle low and shadows deepen, the water takes on a different hua, quiet gray, like a veil, soft and heavy, as though the lake is remembering what lies below. These small details, the ordinary pieces of daily life, are what vanish when a place is lost. It still stands, and in standing, it remembers. Not just buildings or maps, but the rhythm of living. Foundations of kitchens where bread once rose in wood-fired ovens. The trees along the valley dan their golden robes. The air sharpens, and mist curls around the base of the tower in the morning. And visitors come not just for sightseeing, but for something more reflective. Some light candles near the tower's base. Others leave small notes, tucked into cracks in the stone. Wishes, prayers, rememberings. She'd wandered onto the ice alone, curious and brave. When asked, she described the sound not as loud, but as soft as if it came from far away or from deep beneath the ice. A single chime, then nothing more. There is something especially poignant about the lake in autumn season, already marked by transition, echoing the transformation the land once underwent. Perhaps memory finds ways of speaking when we least expect it. Travelers come not just for the view, but to feel something, to connect with a story that is, at its heart, a quiet one. The rhythm of breath matching the lapping of imaginary water. You might picture that solitary steeple, once more its shape blurred by fog, or lit gently by moonlight. You might imagine that beneath the surface, the stones of Graun rest undisturbed, not lost, but simply sleeping. There was no explosion, no invasion. It's just a place that was, and then was not. Yet in some way, still is. Locals and visitors alike walk out onto the ice and gaze toward the steeple. Silence that gathers all the sounds it once made and holds them in stillness. The clamor of weddings, the low hum of funerals, the hopeful carols of Christmas, the tolling of the hour. Now it is simply there, mute, but not empty.
Ow.
They touch its stone. It is rough and cold, under gloved hands. In spring, the ice softens and cracks, and the water begins to warm, though only slightly.
Ow.
Meltwater rushes down from higher ground, feeding the lake with a shimmer of renewal. Wildflowers begin to bloom along the shore. In summer, tourists arrive, drawn by the mystery of the steeple and the beauty of the region.
Ow.
One such story tells of an old man who visits the tower every year on the same day. He brings a small loaf of bread, wrapped in cloth, and sets it beside the stone before sitting in silence for several hours. Some say he was a boy when the town was lost, and the loaf is for someone he left behind. No one asks him, though. The silence around him is respected. Some rent paddle boats. Others take long, slow walks along the paths that circle the lake. And they imagine what it must have been like, not just to lose a house, but to lose a whole village, not to fire or war, but to quiet water, rising steadily without malice or noise. rooms where laughter drifted through cracked windows, stone cellars that stored winter apples, heavy cheese wheels, pickled vegetables. There may still be doorways intact, no longer opened by hand, but preserved in the darkness, dustless, undisturbed. It's said that on certain mornings, if the fog clings just right and the breeze hushes itself, you can almost hear something else beneath the ripples, not the splash of fish or the creak of boats, but something quieter, still like footsteps long ago, or the whisper of stories unfinished. Beneath that water, under silt and time, lie the remains of homes. Some say that when the lake freezes thick in the deepest part of winter, it grants a strange clarity. You might imagine for a moment that you lived in Graun before the flood. Perhaps you were a baker's child, rising early to warm the ovens. Or a farmer who watched snow lines retreat with spring's return. Maybe a schoolteacher, a mason, a shopkeeper. You would have known the church well, the way its bell sounded in the early morning, calling all to mass, the coolness of its interior on hot days, the way sound echoed off its stone walls. You would have had favorite places, a particular tree near the creek. It's the way sunlight slanted through your kitchen window at dusk, the rhythm of boots against cobbled stones when rain fell. Yet, in a curious way, Graun was never fully erased. The bell tower ensures that. It did not sink. It did not break. Though the church bell no longer rings, people say, the silence it holds is just as meaningful. Throughout the year, Lake Resia changes its face. And then, as autumn comes, the light begins to shift. Winter, of course, is the most still. Snow blankets the valley. The lake freezes hard enough to walk across. Local stories have begun to grow around the steeple soft tales passed from mouth to mouth. Another story speaks of a girl who swears she heard the bell ring one early morning, just before sunrise. Of course, it could have been wind or her imagination, but perhaps the bell rang for her and no one else. Over time, the story of Graun has become more widely known. Documentaries have been made, books written. As you lie back now, perhaps your own thoughts begin to slow, and like the town beneath Lake Resia, your own mind can drift downward, slowly, softly, towards stillness. The bell does not need to ring. Its presence is enough. There's a kind of stillness that only water can carry, a patient, deliberate kind of silence. And beneath Lake Resia, that stillness stretches into the past, pressing gently over what remains of the once living village below. The steeple may be the only thing visible to those passing by. But the true weight of the place rests in what you cannot see, in the lives lived below the surface, in the small, forgotten moments that were folded into the landscape and gently drowned. As with all places altered by time and memory, the Graun of today exists in layers. There is the physical layer, the water, the tower, the snow-muffled valley. Paths were sometimes buried, roofs had to be constantly cleared, and food was rationed carefully through the coldest months. Yet these hardships were familiar, woven into the rhythm of survival. In the evenings, families gathered around stone fireplaces, passing stories from one generation to the next, stories that lingered long after the embers cooled. Protests were raised letters sent. Petitions signed, but the voices of a small alpine village carried little weight in Rome, or in the corporate offices that had drawn the dam's blueprints. Slowly, and then all at once, the villagers understood what was coming. It is early, the sun only beginning to rise behind the mountains that cradled the valley. It rose in quiet increments, first lapping at doorsteps, then entering hallways, then claiming entire rooms. And for reasons both practical and poetic, it was never destroyed. Some say it was left as a navigational marker. Locals who grew up hearing their grandparents, stories say they can still feel the old town if they walk the lake's perimeter in the early hours. They say there's a kind of warmth to the air near the tower, even in winter. And sometimes they say you can hear things that aren't quite there. The water's gentle hush, the distant mountains watching over the valley, the story of a town that faded not with fury, but with quiet persistence. A town that did not disappear all at once, but rather settled into rest, beneath a blanket of water, dreams, and time. A child's laugh. A church door closing. The distant clink of a hammer at work. But the rhythm it once carried, the rhythm of days and seasons, of voices rising and falling, of footsteps on stone, still lives here. Not loudly, not urgently, but gently, like a lullaby remembered from childhood, like a soft murmur just beyond hearing, like a dream waiting just below the surface. Others believe it was a kind of apology, a concession to memory. Whatever the reason, the tower stayed, and with it, the last breath of old Graun. No disaster sirens sounded. There was no crashing wave or chaotic rush. Instead, the lake arrived in silence. It filled in the spaces that had once echoed with life and softened them into stillness. But there are others fewer, quieter, who come at night. They sit along the shore, bundled in coats and scarves, watching the stars reflect on the lake's surface. The lake itself has become a feature of tourism, hiking, windsurfing, even winter sports. But for all the activity that surrounds it now, the core of the lake remains still. The steeple remains unchanged. It does not lean. It does not age. It simply watches, year after year, holding its silence with grace. For these visitors, it isn't just a sight to photograph. It's a story to witness, a memory to sit beside, gently, without asking too much of it. But the process moved forward with the quiet inevitability of falling snow. By the summer of 1950, the valley had changed. Where once there were wheat fields and pastures, the dam's construction loomed. Pipes and stone, cables and scaffolding, all symbols of a new beginning, but also of an ending. Houses were marked, possessions were bundled into carts and trucks. And gradually, piece by piece, the old Graun was disassembled. Not by demolition, but by necessity. Plans had been drawn quietly at first. To build a dam that would combine two smaller natural lakes, Resia and Middersee, into a larger artificial reservoir. Engineers saw opportunity in the rising water. It would generate hydroelectric power and modernize the infrastructure of the region. If you listen carefully, it's as though the rhythm of those past lives is still humming faintly in the distance, boots tapping softly on cobblestone. A wooden wheel creaking as it turns, shutters opening slowly to let in the morning sun. These are not loud sounds. They exist more in feeling than in hearing, like the warmth of a fading dream, just after waking. The air is crisp, cool enough to catch in your throat, and the mist that floats above the water moves slowly, as though reluctant to be disturbed. The tower stands, just as it has stood for more than half a century, its stone wet with morning dew, its edges softened by distance. And there are the unseen layers, those stitched together from recollection, records, old letters, and the weathered voices of elders who still remember how the village once felt underfoot. Instead, it was a town built around quiet constancy. People rose early and slept with the setting sun. The fields outside the village fed families through the seasons. The animals moved in calm familiarity through barns and meadows. Life had a cadence, shaped by the church bells, the changing weather, and the cycle of work and rest. Imagine yourself now, once more, walking along the banks of Lake Resia on a quiet day. You pause a moment and close your eyes. Try to imagine the streets of old Graun before the lake was raised. It is not difficult. In the years before the flood, Graun was not a large village. It had no grand palace, no sprawling market square. That cadence was not without its challenges. Winters here were long and often difficult, blanketing the valley in thick layers of snow. The flood that would ultimately submerge the town was not a natural one. It came not from storm or river, but from human design. But such progress, as it often does, came at a cost. The people of Graun were not asked to choose. Decision arrived with the certainty of official paperwork and the echo of distant voices far removed from the mountains. Some packed up quickly. Others resisted, holding on to hope that the plan might be delayed, or even abandoned. One by one, the homes were emptied. Some structures were torn down in preparation for the flooding. Others were left standing, to be swallowed. When the floodgates were finally opened, the water came slowly. It crept into the corners of old barns. Only the church steeple remained. The stone base was strong, even now, in the present day. That breath lingers. Most visitors come during the day, cameras ready, drawn by the surreal beauty of a bell tower rising from a lake. In the years since the flooding, the area has changed. Roads have been improved. New buildings have risen in nearby towns. And as you breathe in now, slowly, you might feel that same stillness wrapping around your thoughts. The church may no longer call its people with sound. In its refusal to disappear completely, it has shops and schools, a post office, and modern houses. Life continues, as it must, but even there, the old Graun is not forgotten. Photographs of the former village hang in community centers. Elders tell stories that begin with, "Before the lake." It is a story of adaptation, people moving forward, even as they carry the echo of what was behind them. It is a story of memory made physically, a place that chose, in its own quiet way, not to disappear entirely. And children learn to recognize the tower not just as a tourist site, but as a symbol of their heritage. Locals walk slowly along the newly revealed shoreline, some perhaps touching the stones, as though greeting an old friend returned briefly from a long journey. But present in the way people glance toward the lake, and the pause they take when passing the steeple on the way to work or school. Not every history needs to shout. Some, like Graun's, are better told in whispers, in softened tones, in the hush of snowfall, in the lap of water against stone. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of water hold your thoughts softly in place. Not in perfect clarity, but in suggestion. Like a memory seen through sleep. It is difficult to tell where imagination ends and truth begins. But then, perhaps that is the point. Memory and water often behave the same way. They both distort and preserve. These exposed remnants are never above water for long, but their brief presence is enough to remind everyone that the village never truly vanished. It simply changed form. Its stones are cold, weathered, smoothed by time. Moss creeps in narrow seams. In winter, it gathers snow on its ledges. In summer, it reflects golden sunlight in the late afternoon, casting a long shadow over the quiet water. It's preserved in photographs, in notebooks, in secondhand recollections passed gently through generations. He moves slowly, not because he is burdened, but because he is deliberate. Each footfall makes a soft crunch in the snow. Some might see that as ironic, protecting a tower to a town that no longer exists. But others see it as sacred work, a commitment to legacy, a way of saying, we still remember, we still care. He is looking at the steeple, as he often does, and perhaps thinking not only of the church itself, across continents, in valleys and lowlands. There are other towns that sleep beneath water villages surrendered to reservoirs and dams, sunken cities whose rooftops occasionally breach the surface when the tide is low. But Graun stands out not because of the size of its tragedy, but because of the simplicity and solitude with which it endures. The bell tower itself has become more than a landmark, no longer rings. There is something both gentle and haunting about standing near it. And still, the town lives on, in ways both small and resilient. During such moments, there is often a quiet reverence among those who visit. People lower their voices, children pause. If you were to dive into the lake, though few do, it is said, you could see outlines of what once was. Walls and roads, perhaps a staircase. In recent years, the steeple has been wrapped in scaffolding for repairs. The community ensures it remains safe, structurally sound. The town of Graun, rebuilt uphill after the flooding, carries the new life of the region. There's a quiet kind of pride in that, not boastful, not even spoken aloud, and perhaps that is how it should be. Imagine the slow hush of twilight settling across the Alpine Valley. A sky brushed with soft hues of lavender and blue begins to dim, mirrored in the still surface of a vast man-made lake. But we do not visit the bustling mountain town as it once was, full of early morning bread ovens and clinking cowbells echoing through the pastures. As we begin, imagine yourself not in modern Italy, but sometime in the early 20th century. Each was small and seasonal, sustained by mountain runoff, and nestled quietly among the villages. Graun lay between them, untroubled by floods or schemes. Its people lived with the rhythm of the land farming, trading, mending, and waiting through the long, snowy winters. Earlier proposals suggested a small rise in water level, some adjustments, a manageable change. Life would go on altered, but still recognizable. The late 1930s saw the momentum grow, though the war would delay its arrival. The people of Graun clung to their routines, uncertain, unsettled, but still holding to the hope that their homes would be spared. You are surrounded by steep alpine slopes, meadows dusted with wildflowers, and a winding river that feeds the valley's life, something abstract, unreal. A conversation for government men in faraway cities. Meanwhile, the rhythms of life continued. Children still learned in the stone schoolhouse. Sunday still brought the soft toll of church bells. Some tried to fight the decision. There were petitions, letters, even legal battles. But resistance, slow and sorrowful, proved futile. The surface is glassy, disturbed only by the wind or the occasional passing bird. It stands not as a triumph, but as a witness quiet, unmoving, dignified. Below it lies Graun, intact in memory, but silent forever in form. The waters have smoothed over it, like a blanket laid over a forgotten bed. But the steeple remains, its pointed top rising from the center of the lake. In winter, when the water freezes, people walk across the ice to stand beside it. Some claim they can still hear the bell toll on certain nights, though no bell remains within. The fields still yielded potatoes and barley and cold-resistant fruits, which the mountain air made all the sweeter. The dam project was revived, and this time it would not be small. Tourists take photos, yes, but many simply stand, watching, listening, imagining what once was. Though its sound no longer echoes across the fields, its presence hums softly through the air, like a lullaby carried by the breeze. Time has passed, water has risen, but memory soft, gentle, persistent refuses to sink. And in that act of quiet reflection, perhaps they come closer to understanding what the people of Graun felt displaced, but never entirely gone. The new plan called for a single reservoir, deep and wide, that would submerge not just fields and roads, but entire villages. Graun would disappear, along with much of neighboring Ration. And then, slowly, the houses began to vanish beneath the lake. Roofs dipped below the surface. Trees stood like skeletons before they too disappeared. Only one structure was left standing above the water, the bell tower of the 14th century church. Its steeple, gray and slender, was too tall to be drowned. Graun is one of those villages that seems to grow out of the land itself, stone houses with wooden balconies. Worn footpaths between fields and a church at the center, whose bell gently reminds the villagers of times passing. Instead, we descend into its story long after its people had gone. After the earth had been leveled and flooded, and after the village clock struck for the last time, now only the steeple remains above water, slender finger pointing skyward, a symbol of quiet endurance. By the 1920s and 30s, a push for hydroelectric power had begun to shape Italy's infrastructure. Electricity, the great invisible force of the modern age, was no longer the luxury of cities. Plans were drafted to dam the river, to combine the natural lakes into a single reservoir. It would generate much-needed power. It would light homes. it would bring progress. Beneath that quiet expanse lies a village, its homes, its fields, its footsteps preserved not in stone or memory, but in silence and water. And above it all, gently reaching toward the heavens, stands a church steeple, solemn, still, almost dreamlike. Note. Tonight, we drift to Graun, also known as Corinen, the region of South Tyrol, Italy. Let yourself settle into the rhythm of this tale, the slow layering of memory over memory, stone over soil, water over stone. The Russian sea Lake Resia did not always exist, where the lake now stretches wide and calm. There were once 3 separate lakes, the Rhaetian Sea, the Mittersee, and the Hadera Sea. But the 20th century was an era of transformation, and not even this tranquil corner of the Alps could resist the sweeping changes underway. But as with so many such plans, it would also erase what had come before. The people of Graun, simple farmers, shepherds, and craftsmen, had long known about the proposed dam, but they believed, perhaps hoped, that it would be modest. In the calm, slow years between world wars, the idea of their town vanishing beneath a lake must have felt like a distant rumor. But time, always quiet and persistent, moved forward. And with it came pressure contracts, signed, maps redrawn, and machinery prepared. Then came 1947. The war had ended, and with it came reconstruction. Italy, weary and scarred, turned once again to the future. The villagers were told with the solemnity of official authority that they must leave. In 1950, the dam was completed. By midsummer, the waters began to rise, first creeping along the edges of the fields, then steadily climbing stone walls, filling cellars, licking at doorframes. Imagine now standing at the edge of that new lake. The tower itself has become more than just a ruin. It is a monument to loss and memory, to the strange way progress sometimes demands erasure. For those who visit Lake Resia today, the sight of the steeple is striking but peaceful. And so the bell tower watches over the valley, just as it always has. As you stand beside the lake, still and breathless in its alpine solitude, you may notice how the tower's reflection dances gently in the water, a perfect twin turned upside down, distorted ever so slightly by ripples. It's almost easy to imagine that beneath that shimmering surface, the rest of Graun sleeps intact. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony. The mood was muted, almost embarrassed, as though the act of flooding a centuries-old village had left a quiet bruise on the landscape. People who had lived in the village for generations were forced to relocate, often not far, but never quite close enough. Their new homes were built uphill on higher ground where the waters could not reach. Safer, yes, but emptier too. Locals and later, visitors from far and wide would walk out across the glassy surface toward the bell tower. It did not crumble or lean, stood unflinching through storm and sunshine, wind and silence. The water lapped at its base in spring and summer, and froze around it in winter, but it remained. They would touch the old stone, run their fingers over the cold, rough facade. The town of Graun Venosta, as it's now called, adapted. But the essence of the place remains undisturbed. You might visit on a cloudy day and find no one else there, just the lap of water, the hush of wind and alpine trees, and the steady silhouette of the tower in the distance. Of the ways in which people persisted always by rebuilding the same things, but by weaving memory into new places. The bell no longer rings. The roads beneath the lake are long buried. But in stories, in soft conversations, in the way the tower still stands, it all lingers. The past feels close. It became part of the collective imagination, a symbol of memory submerged, but never erased. Just the soft breath of night, the old stones beneath the surface, and the quiet bell tower that will keep watch long after we are gone. Ancient Roman paths once crossed this area. Farmers and travelers walked these slopes for centuries before the village even had a name. The rhythm of lives carried on harvesting, sowing, moving with the seasons, quiet, enduring, always adapting. Just as the people of Graun eventually adapted, carrying their memories forward, even as the land beneath them changed. In literature and art, the image of a spire rising from water took on metaphorical meaning. It became a representation of forgotten things that still linger. Of resilience, perhaps, or mourning. The wind is soft, tugging gently at your sleeves. The mountains rise on either side, protective and patient. And there, at the center, is the tower still, unmoved, and utterly at peace. The water reflects the dusky sky, and you watch as one by one the stars begin to appear, first faintly, then clearer, dotting the night above and rippling below. The lake became a site of recreation, even beauty. It simply endured. Perhaps that is why people find it so moving. There is no grandeur in it, no dramatic carvings or gilded stone. It's just pale, weathered stone and a pointed cap reaching upward. And yet, when seen against the vast sky and the mirrored surface of the lake, it becomes something far more powerful, a quiet testament to all that once was. Tourists arrived, drawn by the quiet strangeness of the tower. They came by bicycle, by car, and sometimes just by curiosity. They took photos and drank coffee at nearby. They rented boats and explored the shoreline. But still, there was something unspoken in the air, something respectfully hushed, and looked through the slotted windows, half expecting to hear the old bell's iron voice ring out. Children skated around its base, laughing. Couples posed for photographs. Artists painted the scene, always in soft, melancholic tones. It became a pilgrimage of sorts, not a religious one, but one of remembrance. Homes neatly arranged, doors closed, shutters drawn, a tablecloth still resting on wooden tables waiting for a family to return. In the middle of it, the steeple of the church that once stood beside their homes. In Graun, before the flood, life moved in shared time. The dawn bells, the grazing herds, the Sunday walks, the tending of fields and fences. These patterns were not just routines, they were ways of being. Up the mountains, scattered and replanted like cuttings from an old vine, the people of Graun tried to begin again. But things were different. The houses were newer, the land less known, the view forever altered by that silent lake, the shape of memory transformed into a silent silhouette, a symbol of something not quite gone but not alive either. Fields were once again tilled, and children again walked to school, though now along different paths. Shops reopened, this time built in brick and concrete, not stone. New churches rang their bells, but those who remembered the old Graun carried with them a quiet ache. Stories passed between generations, like folded letters kept in drawers. Photographs, black and white, told of streets and gardens now beneath 30 feet of water. Time may have moved on, but memory lingered like mist, but they will not. The water holds them now and has for decades. The bell tower watches, patient as time itself. In the years following the submersion of Graun, there was no celebration. Imagine what it felt like for those families to climb the hill each day to look out across the newly formed lake and see. The displacement did not only remove structures, it removed something quieter, deeper. It unraveled the rhythm of community. Still, life found a way forward. In winter, when the lake froze thick with ice, something strange and beautiful happened. And yet, through all of this, the tower never changed. Decades passed. What had once been fresh loss softened into legend. Over time, the story of the bell tower of Graun became more than a local tale. But the tower, for all its symbolism, remained simple. It did not claim grand meaning for itself. In recent years, the village and the tower have been featured in documentaries, travel pieces, and even television dramas. And yet, even that past is layered. For before Graun, before the church tower was even built, the valley held older stories still. Perhaps this is what gives the steeple its quiet power. It reminds us not only of what was lost, but of what remains. So now, as you rest in the quiet of evening, imagine standing by the lake once more. There is nothing left to do, no more to decide. Imagine yourself returning to Lake Resia once again, perhaps years after your first visit. The air is just as clean, just as still. The light filters softly through the clouds, and you can hear the low murmur of water lapping at the lake shore, steady as breath. The church steeple remains where you left it, moved, untouched by time. A familiar sentinel, half submerged, bearing the quiet burden of memory without complaint. There are older residents in the nearby village who still speak of the change. They describe the day the water began to rise, not with anger, but with the calm acceptance of those who have lived many seasons. They tell of the silence that followed, how the birds flew away for a time, how the animals shifted their paths as if nature itself paused to make space for what had happened. You walk the perimeter of the lake slowly, deliberately, taking in the surroundings. If one day the lake will be drained, the church taken down, the remains of Graun exhumed, that is enough. But the answer is always the same. No. The tower stays. It has become more than stone and mortar. It is memory in solid form. The air grows cooler. Somewhere in the village, a door closes with a wooden thud. A light flickers on behind a curtain. The rhythm of life continues, above and below.
Ow.
A monument not only to what was lost, but to what endures. Snow fell steadily for weeks, blanketing everything in hushed stillness. And then, when the cold settled deep enough, the water stilled, and a thick sheet of ice covered the surface. People, curious and cautious, stepped out onto it. They walked toward the tower. They circled it slowly, reverently. It was, they say, both beautiful and unsettling. To walk above their old homes, to stand where their kitchens once stood, where laughter and life once filled the air, now replaced by frozen silence. It was a kind of mourning, but also a kind of connection. The landscape appears unchanged, yet it holds new details each time, as if the lake only reveals its secrets with patience. Schoolchildren draw it in their notebooks. Couples take wedding photos beside it. No one claims to have truly heard it, not clearly, but the idea is comforting. That something of the old Graun still echoes upward. A single, soft chime through the ice and the silence. On certain days, the villagers place small candles along the lake shore. At dusk, they light them one by one. The glow reflects in the water, soft and golden, like fireflies caught in glass. It is not an official ceremony, and it is never announced. It simply happens, quietly, when the mood calls for it. A shared remembrance, a silent acknowledgement that though the town is gone, its heart still beats. Small flowers push up through cracks in stones. Birds sweep low across the water, their wings casting delicate shadows. In the distance, the mountains rest under a dusting of snow that never fully melts, even in summer. The air here seems to move more slowly, or maybe time does. It is the kind of place where even your thoughts quiet themselves. There is a museum now, small and modest, nestled near the edge of the village. Inside, behind glass, are fragments from the old Graun, a rusted key, a family photo, faded baptism records, a hand-carved shepherd's staff. To imagine. One wall holds a black and white panoramic photograph of the old town before the flood. It stretches across the room, the past extending from one side to the other. You see rooftops and narrow paths, the steeple at the center, smaller then, because the mountains behind it still towered in full view. Children are caught mid-laughter. Woman peers from a window. A man rests beside a cart loaded with firewood. The entire village, captured at once, just as it was, and will never be again. The staff is smooth from use, the wood worn by fingers that held it through seasons of tending sheep along these very hills. These are not grand relics, not treasures in the traditional sense, but they tell stories softly, patiently. Stories of rhythm and repetition, awaking early in winter to fetch water before the pipes froze, of planting potatoes in the thawing spring soil, of walking home at dusk with the scent of hay clinging to one's clothes. The museum doesn't try to overwhelm you. Instead, it invites you to linger, to take your time. But history is not always held in buildings or artifacts. Sometimes it clings to the land itself. They also speak of the first time the lake froze after the flood. It was a long winter. Over the years, the tower has become part of the community in a new way. There is a legend quietly told, passed from elder to child, that on especially cold nights, when the wind moves just right across the lake, you can hear the faint toll of the old church bell beneath the water. Visitors often ask if the tower will be removed. Some things are meant to remain unresolved. The lake does not explain itself. The steeple offers no answers. They simply exist, quietly, holding space. And as evening begins to descend once more, the lake takes on its twilight colors blues, deepening into gray, clouds stretched like soft wool across the sky. Night arrives gently over Lake Resia, the kind of night that doesn't fall so much as it slowly gathers. The way clouds gather before a snowfall, or thoughts gather in a quiet mind before sleep. The outlines of the mountains soften, the air stills, and the lake begins to darken into a smooth, glassy mirror. In the last light of day, the bell tower stands in silhouette silent, unwavering, as it always has. Imagine yourself sitting along the lake's edge, the damp earth beneath you firm and cool. The world becomes muffled as if wrapped in wool. Its light spills silver across the lake, outlining the tower in a pale halo. The snow sparkles. Shadows stretch long and thin. It doesn't demand to be remembered. It simply is. The tower makes no declarations. It stands without inscription. It doesn't explain its story to every passerby. It waits, quietly, for those willing to notice. And once noticed, it stays with you. Not like a loud song or a bright painting, but like the scent of old wood, or the hush of snowfall at dusk. And though the bell inside has long been removed, taken down before the flooded S, easy to imagine its echo. To raise their children on stories not just of what is, but of what was. Memory, after all, is its own kind of presence. The color changes from steel gray to something almost turquoise. The trees bud with new leaves. And for a time, the tower seems to shimmer with renewed brightness. The season changes. The land breathes in again. Life stirs, don't always gently. Some of those children, now grown, walk down to the lakeshore on cool evenings and try to find the spots their grandparents spoke of. The submerged streets of old Graun are gone. Yes, but they are also present in stories, in dreams. In the rhythm of days that continue with quiet purpose. The church tower, alone and surrounded by water, has become something more than architecture. It is a pause in time, a breath held in stone. People will walk by, stop, look, and continue. But the steeple will remain. It's the place where the baker's house once stood. It's a footpath that curved around the school. A feeling gentle and deep. The kind that settles behind your ribs and asks nothing from you, only that you notice. It's not a story of destruction, but of preservation. Not of loud history, but of soft remembering. They can't see them now, but they know they're there, beneath the water, beneath time, still held by the land. And the last bird calls from the treetops before sleep. We leave the tower behind, not forever, but just for now. It will be there when you return, always watching, always waiting, always still. Not a sound you hear exactly, but something you feel. Soft resonance, somewhere between memory and imagination. And in those moments, the lake disappears beneath the weight of white, its edges blending into field and sky. The sharpness of loss has dulled into something more contemplative, more reflective, like the surface of the lake itself. There is sadness, yes, but not bitterness. It's the people who remain have found a way to balance what was taken with what remains. A bell that no longer rings, a tower that no longer guides, but still it stands. Still, it watches. The tower looks not so much submerged then, but emerging, rising out of the snow, not water. By the weight of unspoken farewells, others say it brings luck to touch the stone when the lake freezes and allows you close. Some whisper, with a touch of superstition, the dreams dreamt near the tower are deeper, longer, and more vivid than those dreamt elsewhere. And though none can say for sure, no one quite wants to test it. In those brief hours, one might believe it's part of a dream, something imagined by the land itself, rather than a remnant of what once was. They take their photos, admire the view, and then they leave. But the people who live here, they don't look at the tower in quite the same way. For them, it's not a novelty. It's a member of the community, a piece of the family that didn't leave. The scent of grass rises faintly in the air. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks just once, then is quiet. Everything feels settled, as though the entire valley has taken a deep breath and now simply holds it. There's a peace here that asks nothing of you. No urgency, no rush, only stillness. In the village above the lake, lights have begun to glow behind curtains, not brightly, just enough to cast golden halos around window panes. The streets are quiet now. Children are inside. The last farmer has locked his gate and turned in. The day is done. You can imagine the villagers at their dinners, or perhaps sitting in their kitchens with mugs of warm milk or tea, speaking softly or not at all. And always, below the slope, the steeple remains. A presence more than a structure. A shared breath between past and present. There are times in the deeper winter when the snowfall comes heavy and slow, each flake drifting like a feather. Some nights when the clouds part, the moon rises high above the valley. There is something curious about this place. The people of Graun have learned to live beside memory, to plant gardens where fields once stood. There's a quiet comfort in that. In knowing that something doesn't need to be seen to still exist in some way. The story of the sunken town, as it is told now, has softened over the decades. You might hear different stories from different people. Some say the steeple is haunted not by ghosts, but by feelings. Tourists come and go, drawn by curiosity, by the strangeness of a steeple in the lake. In spring, when the snow begins to melt from the peaks, water rushes down the mountainsides, feeding the lake once more. Years have passed, decades even, and still no one has forgotten. And as you sit here with me, in thought or in quiet listening, perhaps you can feel the rhythm of it too. The water will rise and fall, the wind will come and go. Snow will fall, melt, fall again. And perhaps one day, should you find yourself at Lake Resia, in the hush of late evening, you'll sit beside the water and understand something without needing to say it. That you listen, you rest. And so, as the night settles further, as the wind slows, imagine waking just before dawn, long before the sun has fully decided to rise. The world is still cloaked in a muted kind of gray-knot darkness. Exactly, but the quiet veil that comes just before light. The chill in the air greets you first, not sharp or biting, but crisp. The kind of cold that awakens without startling. A pale ribbon of mist hovers above the water, barely moving, as if time itself has paused to stretch. You stop a few meters from the shore and look out. The steeple rises as always, etched softly into the morning haze, its shape blurred by mist but unmistakable. It's not a grand tower. It's not tall or ornate. A man feeding chickens before heading to the fields. These were not remarkable acts. They were the heartbeat of the town, steady, dependable, human. Yet here, against the stillness of the lake and the slow breath of dawn, it feels monumental. The bell marked time, yes, but it also marked togetherness. But somehow, the silence itself has taken on meaning. It is a silence that speaks. A shared sound in a shared space. It echoed across stone and snow and soil. It meant that someone was always listening, always calling. That reflection, as much as the tower itself, has become part of the story. Locals speak of it with quiet reverence. On especially clear days, when the wind is absent and the light is just right, the tower and its mirrored twin seem to touch a vertical axis that divides the past from the present, the above from the below. First the announcements, then the surveys, then the removal of the bell, the closing of homes, the emptying of barns, and then the water. Slow at first, then faster, filling up, swallowing. Your breath fogs lightly as you walk toward the lake, and then, inevitably, the water calms, and the reflection returns, as if nothing had disturbed it at all. Whatever the reason, it was left behind. And in doing so, it became something more than it ever was before. The flooding of Graun wasn't an act of nature, it was a choice. And the tower, ever the same, casts its silent watch across the water. Not just knowledge, not just the facts of what happened, but a feeling, a weightless kind of knowing, quiet respect for the things that remain. A decision made far away by engineers and planners, by companies and governments. They saw the valley not for what it was, but for what it could be used for. A reservoir, hydroelectric dam, progress. It is a gentle lesson unspoken that what is true will always return. That memory, even when temporarily scattered, will always find its shape again. The silence is not absolute, but it is full. The light touches the peaks first, then drips downward, at illuminating pine trees and rocky slopes, and finally, the lake itself. The water shimmers faintly. The mist begins to lift, and the tower, no longer shrouded, stands in clear relief against the brightening sky. As if beneath its smooth surface, the old village of Graun is holding its breath, waiting with you. Not to return, not to reclaim, but simply to be acknowledged, to be remembered. Full of subtleties, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant drip of water falling from a branch, the occasional call of a bird just beginning its song. It is a silence that wraps around you gently, as if placing a shawl across your shoulders. The earth beneath your feet is slightly damp, the stones along the path cool and worn smooth by years of footsteps. You are near Lake Resia again, Perhaps you're staying in a small guest house, the kind with wooden beams and lace curtains that gently billow at night when the wind stirs through the valley. You rise slowly, without hurry, and step outside. The lake is still, perfectly still, as though it too is not quite ready to begin the day. You sit down on a rock near the edge, letting your body sink into its cool surface. In these quiet moments, before the world fully wakes, the lake feels almost more alive, not with movement, but with presence. It's easy here to imagine what once was. You can almost see it, if you allow your mind to soften. Picture the rooftops below, arranged like tiles on a tapestry. Narrow streets winding gently between stone cottages. Baker setting his loaves to rise before the sun. Smoke curling from chimneys. The clatter of wooden shoes on stone. It's not loud, just present. The rhythm of life in motion, in repetition, in ritual. There would have been routines, so many small and important ones. A boy carrying milk down the lane. A woman sweeping her stoop. And when the church bell rang, it was not just a sound. It was a signal, a gathering point, a reminder. Now, of course, the bell is gone, removed before the water came. The tower holds only silence. The sun begins to rise now, slowly, like warm honey, poured gently over the edges of the mountains. Casts a long, narrow reflection on the lake's surface dull, solemn, unwavering. Children from the village sometimes toss stones toward the reflection, trying to break it, laughing when the ripples distort the perfect image. Visitors often ask questions about the history, about the people, about the moment the lake rose. But the answers are not always simple. For the people of Graun, progress came in waves, and yet not an erasure. Because despite all of that, the steeple remained. A compromise, perhaps, or a mistake, or maybe a kind of mercy. You rise from the stone now, your legs a little stiff from the stillness, but your breath, deep and steady. The sun is higher. The lake has brightened, and maybe as you walk back toward your room, toward warmth and tea and the slow unfolding of the day, you carry something new with you. You may have noticed, as you begin your slow walk back from the lake's edge, that the morning light now has a soft golden tint. Not the brash glare of a summer noon, but something more reserved, filtered, and faint, like light remembered through the years. The shadows are still long, cast at curious angles across the hills and walkways, giving the landscape the feeling of an old photograph, gently fading at the corners. Somewhere a child is reading, their feet tucked beneath them, turning a page slowly, just as the world outside turns too quietly and without notice. Around you, the valley is quietly stirring, in a rush, but in the slow rhythm of a place that has learned patience. You pass a small cluster of houses near the road-mata structures, many of them newer than the original town that once stood below the lake, yet built with a kind of reverence, a kind of pull, not fear, not sorrow, just the echo of a place once full of lives. Weathered wood, pale stone, windows that seem to look inward as much as outward. The people of Graun, their descendants, their neighbors, those who stayed and those who returned all, hold pieces of the story. Some speak it aloud. It is always at a remove. It's always just out of reach. Like memory, like history. Not the actual structures. The wood would have rotted. The stone would have shifted. The rooftops long collapse, but the shape of the town that still exists in the minds of those who remember. Because it is layered not just with facts, but with feelings. Did they see the same view? Did they pause as you do, to take in the shape of the hills, the sound of water, the slow procession of clouds? Did they wonder in idle moments whether their lives would be remembered? Letters written, pleas made? Anger, surely, and sadness. The last glance at a window pane, knowing it would not be seen again. These were not dramatic exits. They were slow goodbyes, stretched over months and years. Goodbyes made not with fanfare, but with the quiet movements of people leaving behind what they could not carry, and perhaps resignation, the kind that settles in when the future arrives and does not wait for you to agree. Beneath you, the water moves gently, catching light in little broken mirrors. A door opens, a laugh floats out, and you realize that life has continued, not in spite of the loss, but alongside it. The memory of Graun has not frozen in time. It lives beside the present. It exists not as a wound, but as a whisper. You lean against the railing, letting your fingers graze the cool stone. In the distance, the tower is framed against the lake like a quiet sentinel, always watching, always waiting. Not just the tower, but the thread of memory that bound people to it. A thread that has not unraveled even now. You pass by a wooden bench beside a stand of trees. It is empty now, but you imagine someone sitting there later today, perhaps with a journal, or a sketch pad, or simply with thoughts. There are many ways to remember. Some are loud, some are monuments, some are silent acts of presence. That a place can cease to exist in the physical sense and still hold presence in the minds of many. That stories like rivers find new paths when the old ones are closed. And for a moment, it feels as though time has softened like thick fabric, folded and put away, waiting to be unfolded again, with longing, with absence, with the ache of knowing that a place once lived is now only remembered, a town that remains fixed in time, unmoving, untouched by the noise and change of the modern world. But you'd like to believe that they felt some version of what you feel now. Quiet awe at the vastness of the world and the smallness of each moment within it. Like the parts of ourselves we only visit in dreams. Some keep it tucked away like an old letter in a drawer, pulled out only now and then to be read in solitude. And some pass it on in simpler ways. A photograph on a wall, a drawing. A story at bedtime that begins. Once, there was a village beneath the lake. And in one of those houses, perhaps a person is boiling water for tea. Another is folding linens near a window. You'd sip your drink slowly, the steam curling upward, and the locals might speak in hushed tones as if the tower itself could hear. They might tell you that during certain winters, when the lake freezes hard and smooth, you can walk right up to the steeple, close enough to lay a hand against its stone. And when you do, it feels colder than anything else around it, colder even than the ice, as if the chill of memory itself has been absorbed into its very bones. Well, there's something very human about how stories settle over a place. You might hear such stories while sitting at a cafe in Resia, the neighboring town. Others say that if you walk across that frozen stretch on a windless night, and you listen not for sound, but for stillness, you might feel something in your chest. And as the ice begins to melt with the changing seasons, the tower once again becomes unreachable. Marooned by water, surrounded by slow-moving ripples and the passing reflections of clouds. Perhaps that is part of the tower's quiet power, that it is never quite accessible. It is worth imagining now what lies beneath. That imagined Graun is, in some ways, more vivid than the real one ever was. You pause again, standing at the edge of a small stone bridge that crosses a narrow stream. You think about the people who once stood where you are now. It's difficult to say. When the decision came to flood the valley, when the companies and engineers marked the land and measured the soil and tallied the homes, there must have been protests. And then, eventually, the days of departure, the closing of shutters, gathering of heirlooms, the final walk through a garden path. Still, even as the water rose, even as the town disappeared beneath its smooth surface, something remained. And maybe that's the most extraordinary thing. Something can be submerged, totally completely yet not lost. You resume your walk, the village now fully awake behind you. Gentle breeze stirs the leaves, and the smell of pine and distant wood smoke fills the air. As you return to your guest house, the scent of baking bread reaches you from a kitchen nearby. And in that whisper, in that shared remembering, there is peace. Imagine yourself once again on the shores of Lake Resia, where the soft lapping of water against stone whispers secrets older than memory. The wind here is no longer sharp, but hushed, carrying with it the crisp scent of alpine grasses and distant ice. People had walked these streets, boots had struck stone, hooves had echoed on cobbles, and the air had rung with the low tones of conversation and the clang of tools. That it had once smelled of fresh bread in the morning and wood smoke in the winter. It was quiet, like so many alpine villages are, shaped not by ambition, but by necessity. Snowfalls could block the mountain passes. Illness could sweep through the valley before help could arrive. But the people of Graun endured, bound together by generations of shared endurance. Outside investors spoke of progress, of modern energy, of the need for development. The bell still rang. But beneath the surface of daily life, a growing sense of unease began to settle. Meetings were held in small halls, Farmers gathered in low-ceilinged inns. Their voices kept calm but waited. Papers were signed. Some protested, but their words, like so many before them in distant places, were drowned by decisions already made. The reservoir, they said, would bring power to the region, would make lives better far away from the quiet valley. They might be silent for a long while. They might listen, as though expecting the bell to ring. Carefully, they have swum through doorways that once welcomed neighbors and friends. They have glided past submerged shutters and stone cellars. Algae grows on walls that once held family portraits. Fish drift through rooms once warmed by fire and conversation. There is no fear in this place. No haunting. It's just a deep, gentle hush. But it does not. It has not rung since the water came. Perhaps in dreams the streets are still walked, the bread still baked, the candles still lit. Perhaps the bell still tolls in memory, soft and distant. The bell was removed before the flooding, taken to a new church in a different place. Only the shell remains stall, empty, and silent. The town, they said, would need to move. The bell tower that now stands above the lake had once marked their days. It rang at weddings. It tolled at funerals. It called the faithful to mass. Its sound rising gently into the cold mountain air. The wind stirs again, cool and thoughtful. And you standing by the edge might find your breath slowing, your thoughts drifting, your eyes growing heavy. Not loudly, not urgently, but gently, like a hand resting briefly on your shoulder. The winters were long, the summers brief. Life followed the seasons with a steady patience. Men hauled hay from high meadows, storing it in wooden barns that creaked under the weight. Women made butter in churns, passed down from mothers to daughters, their hands calloused yet careful. Children, always resourceful, learned to skate on the winter ice and to fish in the spring-fed brooks. Furniture was wrapped in blankets. Photographs were tucked into tins. Doors were locked behind them one final time. Pipes and channels fed the valley, inch by inch. The fields turned to marsh, then to shallows, and finally to deep water. The buildings sank out of sight, their rooftops vanishing last, like the final breath of a long-held moment. Some wept. Others simply stared at the mountains, silent. The steeple tall and firm remained, untouched. It had been promised to stay, a symbol, they said, of what once was. A gesture, perhaps of memory, or maybe guilt. They grew up slowly, like the trees, shaped by wind and time. That its fields had once glowed golden in the sun, and the sound of cowbells had rung up into the hills. Now those fields are gone. The cows have long since been driven to new pastures. But their memory, like the memory of the villagers who once made cheese, patched roofs, or knelt in quiet prayer, still lingers like a breath caught in the trees. But now there is only stillness. The walls below the lake have not crumbled. They rest patiently, cradled by the silt and moss, as if waiting for a time that will never return. The tall steeple of the old church stands quietly, unmoved by the decades that have slipped by. Its stone is worn, but not broken. It leans ever so slightly to one side, not from age, but from the slow and careful settling of history itself. Beneath the surface, where the water darkens to a greenish blue, rest the foundations of a town once full of daily rhythms. It is easy to forget, standing on this shore, that this place Graun in Vinch-Gohad once been vibrant. In the years leading up to the submergence, Graun was not a city of grandeur or noise. There had always been challenges here. And then, change came, not swiftly as one might imagine, but slowly, almost politely. It arrived in letters and proposals, meetings and blueprints. At first, the idea seemed abstract. Water, after all, was not yet rising. Homes still stood. Children still played. And so, the preparations began. Families packed their belongings into carts and crates. The water came not in a flood, but gradually. And when the lake had settled and the surface became smooth once more, only the steeple remained, rising above it all, lone. Today you might find a traveler standing at the edge, gazing at that solitary tower. Divers have visited the ruins below. It is easy here to imagine the past continuing just beneath the surface. And as the sun sets over Lake Resia, casting the tower in long golden shadows, the silence becomes even softer. Because this place, with its sleeping history and its quiet dignity, asks for nothing but remembrance. And so, beneath the cool, clear surface of Lake Resia, the story of Graun continues not in noise or movement, but in stillness. What was once vibrant and lived in now sleeps in silence, the kind of silence that feels complete. The church tower, once just another piece of the village skyline, has become something more, something sacred. Some say the cold waters of the reservoir have preserved the village like a forgotten artifact, undisturbed in its watery vault. The deeper one goes, the more the color drains away, until only shades of green, blue, and gray remain. And in this underwater dusk, the town seems to hold its breath, waiting for something that will not come. Not daily, not loudly, but with the slow rhythm of something personal. Elders remember it. Some were children when the town disappeared. They recall carrying crates with dishes wrapped in cloth, saying goodbye to goats, to trees, to window views they knew they'd never see again. They remember the quiet packing, the final walks, the last look at the bell tower before the water began to rise. There are no bustling footsteps anymore. No footsteps on cobblestone or wheels rolling on narrow paths. Others remain stone-faced, hiding their pain behind pride. A hydroelectric future. And true light did come to many places. It becomes part of the land again, if only for a season. They're close to its stones. You can see the marks of age, the chisel work of long-forgotten masons, the cracks worn by decades of sun and frost. You can touch the stone, feel its chill, and know that once, just here, the town square had stood. Their reflections dance on the black surface of the water, broken only by the silhouette of that solemn tower. And in the hush of the alpine dark, it's easy to imagine time folding gently inward. The steeple, the town, the people, they are not gone. They are resting quietly, just beneath the surface, where memory sleeps and dreams continue. Power flowed. But in Graun, the lights went out, and darkness gentle, persistent darkness settled in their place, and called it a necessary sacrifice, to think not just of what was lost, but of what still remains. Others called it theft, but the lake, indifferent to names, simply remained. The way water can carry grief and still offer peace, the way silence can be full, not empty, and the way even submerged, a home can remain. But in the end, the water came. Not with a roar or a flood, but with slow certainty. And when it arrived, it didn't just cover land, it carried away a way of life. Only silt, settling, gently, endlessly, like the dust of forgotten time. Divers who glide among the ruins describe not ruins at all, but structures that still hold their shape. The new buildings were different, more functional, less steeped in history. There were new streets and new homes, but no old smells of bread, no ancestral barns, no walls that had stood for centuries. The people made new memories. Children grew up. Life inevitably went on. But even as the new Graun grew, its heart remained underwater. They often look toward it as they work, and some nod, not in fear or reverence, but out of quiet respect. The steeple is a neighbor now, constant and present. Some smile, others simply stare. A few ask about what lies beneath. Some read plaques. A few light candles on shore. Most stay only briefly before moving on to the next site, the next story, the next destination. But some linger. They sit on stones by the edge of the water. They listen to the wind. And maybe, just maybe, they hear something. A whisper in the waves, or the echo of a bell that no longer rings. They say you can feel something when you're close to a tank. Perhaps, or simply the presence of something that once was whole. Ghosts in the way of haunted tales, but memories soaked deep into the stone. Homes with doorways intact. Stone hearths where fire once lived. Iron tools rusted but recognizable, lying where they were left. Not just a relic of faith, but a sentinel of memory. As the seasons pass, the tower changes color subtly. In spring, the stones glow soft and pale, touched by warmth. In summer, the air grows thick with heat, and the tower seems to shimmer. Autumn brings a crispness that sharpens its edges. And winter. Winter turns it into a silhouette against snow and sky, both beautiful and lonely. Time in this part of the world does not press forward with urgency. Instead, it drifts like mist across the water, barely noticed yet always present. Each morning, the light gently creeps across the lake, casting long golden streaks that dance across the stone walls of the steeple. No other buildings remain visible. They rest far beneath, preserved in a silence so complete that even time dares not disturb them. There is, of course, no light down there. Fishermen, who come and cast their lines near the steeple, speak little. In nearby towns, places not swallowed by water, the name Graun is still spoken. There were protests, yes. Some resisted to the very end. They wrote letters. They tried to stop the machines, wept openly. The promise had been of progress, of electricity for homes across the region, a modern solution. A new town was built nearby, also called Graun. Some families stayed together, others moved away. And yet the steeple, slender and sure, keeps vigil. Tourists come now. They walk to the edge of the lake. They take photographs of the tower. In winter, when the lake freezes over, the tower seems to grow closer. You can walk across the ice to its base. There's no rush here, no urgency. No. The past, preserved in water and memory, invites you to slow down, to sit a while. Perhaps that is why this story lingers. It is not just about a village, not just about a steeple. It's about the way places remember. When night falls on Lake Resia, the stars blink quietly overhead. When you return to the shores of Lake Resia, whether in memory, imagination, or in person, it does not feel like you are arriving at a destination. Instead, it feels like you are slipping gently into a stillness that has always been there, waiting without expectation. The lake is not boastful, does not demand your attention. It offers no drama. It stands without struggle. Its presence is not defiant, but assured, as though it never considered disappearing, even as everything else did. No bells ring, no clock ticks, yet time itself seems to arrange its pace around this still point, like water eddying around a stone. And perhaps, in this modern world that so often seeks spectacle, that ordinariness is its gift. Life there moved to an alpine rhythm dictated by harvests, seasons, the needs of animals and land. Wheat would sway in summer fields, cattle bells would echo in the morning light, bread would rise in wood-fired ovens, and the soft glow of oil lamps would light families gathered close in winter months. What of the light at dusk that slanted a certain way through a particular window? It hums with the work of electricity, converting the slow force of water into power for places far away. For progress has its own rhythm too, and the world changes always. Electricity hums quietly in homes and schools and businesses, many of them built in the years after the flooding. They arrive with cameras, brochures, and an earnest desire to understand. And while some may leave with pictures and facts, others leave with something quieter. A pause, a lingering question, a tenderness they cannot quite name. For the story of Graun is not told in headlines or history books. It is told in whispers, in water, in the stillness that remains long after the voices have gone, waiting for the curious, the thoughtful, the quiet-hearted, waiting, perhaps, for you. And among those living in those homes are descendants of Graun. They walk new streets, tend new churches, yet they carry with them an unspoken lineageous sense of something beneath their feet, even when it is miles away. Not just a landmark or a monument, but a shadow drawn in moonlight. A vertical thread connecting sky to water, past to present. Its reflection stretches gently across the lake's surface, broken only by the movement of wind or the slow glide of a water bird. In these moments, it's easy to imagine that time has folded upon itself, and that the steeple is not only here, but also there above and below, then and now. The people who made the decision to flood the valley were not monsters. They were engineers, officials, problem solvers. And the people who suffered the loss were not martyrs. They were neighbors, mothers, sons, each playing their role in a story larger than any one life. But even so, when the light glints off its concrete face in the distance, it's hard not to think of the contrast between what was taken and what was created. Breathe in the cold, clean air, and in that stillness, you may find that you are not alone. Not in a ghostly sense, but in the quiet presence of all those who have loved this place before. Their footprints long vanished, but their memory cradled in every drop of water, Every stone, every breath of wind that passes through the valley, the view of a favorite tree, the weight of tradition passed from one pair of hands to another in the same barn on the same bench, generation after generation. These things you cannot relocate. These things are what remain beneath the lake, woven into its silence. It merely is broad, deep, and steady, like a breath taken slowly and held just long enough to feel safe. But because the pattern of their days overlapped constantly, the blacksmith would pass the teacher. You do not think of your house as merely yours? Is your family's place in the shared rhythm? And so, when the village was taken, when the dam was built, and the lake allowed to rise, it was not just homes that were submerged, it was continuity. The baker would speak with the priest. The shepherds coming down from the slopes would greet the carpenter in the same way their fathers once had. Their lives were interwoven, not always harmoniously, but always inevitably. Who first laid its foundation stones? Who climbed its narrow staircase in the early days to ring the morning bells? You might picture a child sitting in its upper room, feet dangling from a windowsill, watching the field stretch below, unaware that one day the very earth they loved would vanish beneath a man-made sea. And yet, beneath that surface, something lingers. Not just the stone remnants of houses or shops or doorways once crossed, but something less defined and perhaps more lasting. A kind of memory that clings not only to architecture, but to air and water alike. Imagine standing at the shoreline on an early autumn morning. The mist lifts slowly from the lake, as though reluctant to leave. The only sounds are those made by nature, the rustle of wind in the alpine grasses, the occasional call of a bird overhead, and the soft lapping of the water against stone. Your eyes are drawn, as they always are, to the steeple rising calmly from the lake's center. From here, your thoughts might begin to wander, not in leaps, but in slow, circular turns, wondering who built the steeple and when. There is a kind of softness in thinking these thoughts. Not sadness, not exactly. Rather, the feeling of brushing a hand across old fabric, a warmth, in the familiarity of imagining a life that is no longer here, but not entirely gone. It is said that before the lake came, Graun was not extraordinary. The villagers of Graun knew each other by name, not simply because it was a small place when you live in such a place. Your story is not separate from the story of the village. Some families saved what they could, others could not. Furniture was moved, photos tucked into boxes. But what of the things that cannot be carried? The dam itself stands some distance from the steeple. It is a massive structure, stark and functional, built from the language of industry, not community. And yet, it is not a villain in this story. Not exactly. Even now, the region benefits from that dam. Each year, there are visitors who come to learn about the old town, and always, there is the tower. At night, under a sky freckled with stars, it becomes something else entirely. You might sit on a nearby rock, a wool blanket over your shoulders, and simply watch it. Listen to nothing. And so the story of Graun continues not as a history confined to books, but as a presence that rests just beneath the surface. If you lean closer to the water's edge on a misty morning, you might catch a glimpse of the steeple's reflection in the lake, wavering and shifting with the gentle ripples. The surface, like a vast mirror, holds the image just long enough before the slightest breeze scatters it into countless sparkling fragments. They rose with the sun, their days beginning quietly with the smell of fresh bread baking in communal ovens and the faint clatter of tools preparing for the work ahead. The world was alive with small, persistent sounds, the chirp of crickets in the twilight, the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a cooling breeze, the distant lowing of cattle settling into the night. These were the sounds that cradled daily life, that marked the passage of time more gently than any clock. The rhythmic toll of the church bell once marked time for the village, its call guiding farmers out to their fields and signaling moments of rest or prayer. There was a practical understanding, after all. Change is a constant in the world, but also a profound sense of loss. For Graun was not just a collection of buildings, it was a home. A place where generations had lived, laughed, and loved. The earth itself held memories, and now, those memories faced the quiet erasure beneath rising waters. It's a delicate reminder that beneath this calm, mirrored surface, a hidden world rests, a world of lost streets and vanished voices, Some items were simpler. Favorite chair, a well-worn quilt, while others were heavy with meaning, like photographs of ancestors or keepsakes passed down through time. The silence on these winter days is profound, broken only by the occasional creak or pop of the ice as it adjusts to temperature changes. Alpine flowers bloom in the meadows that slope toward the water's edge, their colors soft and subtle under the mountain sun. It is a silent witness to the past, standing not only as a reminder of what was lost, but also as a symbol of continuity, of a place where history flows as softly as the currents. Beneath the steeple, where the rhythm of life is measured in waves and whispers, and where if you listen closely you can hear the echoes of a sleeping city beneath the lake. Time passes around it, seasons shift, and yet it endures. In its stillness is a calm that seems to invite you to pause, to breathe, to listen, to rest. Fish dart beneath the surface, weaving through submerged structures. Birds nest in the cliffs nearby, their songs floating lightly on the breeze. The landscape here feels both timeless and fragile, an invitation to move gently, to observe quietly. Each box, each bag, was a container, not just of things, but of stories. Plans for the dam had been laid quietly at first, discussed in distant offices and in meetings far removed from the daily rhythm of Graun's inhabitants. Some told of the bell that never ceased to ring, its toll audible on quiet nights when the wind was just right. Others spoke of ghostly lights flickering beneath the water, or the faint outlines of windows visible beneath the surface at dawn. These tales were gentle whispers, carried on by those who longed to keep Graun's spirit alive. The scent of freshly cut hay on the fields, the rough bark of the ancient linden tree by the village square, the warmth of the hearth in winter, all these belonged to the land itself. It would stay held by the earth as it transformed beneath the advancing water. The promise was one of progress. Electricity for cities, power to fuel industry, a future shaped by modern needs. Instead, there was a measured stillness, as if the village was holding its breath, watching itself slip slowly into the past. The lake grew inch by inch, swallowing gardens and roads, fences and doorsteps. The steeple, rising taller than any other structure, stood as a final sentinel, silent, watchful, and enduring. The details were technical and abstract, the voices talking in terms of kilowatts and engineering feats. But for the villagers, the reality was more immediate and deeply personal. Fishermen cast their lines into the cold, clear water, their movements slow and deliberate. Hikers traversed the trails that wind through the surrounding mountains, pausing now and then to gaze across the expanse of water. Photographers wait patiently for the perfect light, capturing the steeple's silhouette against dawn or dusk. The villagers who once called Graun home had their lives shaped by the seasons and the landscape in ways that might feel distant to us today. Women tended gardens that clung to the rocky slopes, nurturing rows of vegetables and herbs, while men worked in fields or workshops. Each face, familiar and steady, reflected a life bound intimately to place. Imagine yourself stepping back into those days, feeling the rough texture of woolen clothing against your skin, the scent of pine and damp earth heavy in the mountain air. Life in Graun was a patchwork of routine and care. Children would run along narrow cobblestone paths, their laughter echoing softly between houses made of sturdy stone and timber. Yet, beneath this tranquil surface of village life, the slow pulse of change was gathering. When the decision came to flood the valley, the news was met with a mixture of resignation and sorrow. Families packed what they could, their belongings carried away in slow, deliberate steps. Yet, no matter how carefully packed, some pieces of home could not be taken. The day the waters began to rise was marked by a strange quiet. There was no rushing, no dramatic goodbyes. In the years that followed, stories of the sunken village took on a life of their own. For the modern visitor, the experience of the lake is often one of peaceful reflection. At certain times of the year, when the lake freezes over in the deepest cold, people can walk upon the ice, stepping lightly over the surface that hides so much history beneath. Even the flora and fauna around Lake Resia tell a story of adaptation and endurance. Through all of this, the steeple remains the steadfast heart of the lake. And perhaps this is the true story of Graun and Lake Resia, one of loss alone, but of quiet persistence. of memory held gently beneath water and sky. As you settle into the quiet embrace of the lake's surroundings, imagine the soft murmur of the wind weaving through the mountain pines, carrying with it the faint scent of damp stone and ancient wood. The world here moves slowly, as if in gentle conversation with itself. The distant steeple of the submerged village stands like a silent guardian, its pointed tip reaching towards the ever-changing sky, a sentinel watching over memories held deep beneath the water. Imagine yourself walking along the village streets just before dawn, when the air is crisp and cool, the sky painted in soft shades of lavender and pale gold. The soft clink of milk pails and the rustle of fabric as woolen garments are donned are part of the quiet soundtrack that accompanies the village's awakening. Forests of pine and fir stretch upward, their needles whispering secrets to the breeze. Farmers tend their fields, hands deep in the rich soil as they coax crops from the land. Simple dishes, prepared with care and love, are shared amid soft conversation and laughter. The warmth of the hearth spreads gently through the room, carrying with it the comforting scent of simmering stews and baking pastries. Outside, the fading light of day softens the edges of the village, casting long shadows and bathing the stone walls in a gentle glow. Shepherds guide their flocks along mountain paths, their calls mingling with the distant murmur of streams tumbling over rocks. The sun dips low, casting long golden rays across the valley. Smoke rises softly from chimneys, curling upward like gentle reminders of life still burning, still flickering against the coming darkness. The steeple, taller than any other building, catches the last light of day, its silhouette sharp and unwavering. They watch the light dance on the water's surface and feel the gentle pull of a story beneath the calm. For many, the lake offers a space of reflection and tranquility, a place where the past and present mingle like the mist that rises in the early morning. The stars emerge one by one, their light flickering softly like distant lanterns. The cool night air carries the scent of pine and the promise of rest. In this moment, the sleeping city beneath the lake and the world above become one a seamless whole, bound by time, memory, and the quiet grace of enduring silence. Artisans work in small workshops, shaping wood and metal into tools, household items, and pieces of quiet beauty. The fields and homes slowly disappeared beneath the surface, as if swallowed by a quiet, patient sea. Reflections shimmered where doorways once opened, and fish darted where children once played. The church bell, silenced but present, became a symbol of endurance, reminder that beneath the waves, the spirit of the village persisted. The pace is deliberate, measured a reflection of lives lived in close dialogue with nature. Trees that once bordered fields now stood sentinel at the water's edge, their roots dipping into the cold depths. Birds adapted, their songs echoing differently across the open expanse. The lake became a habitat rich with life, a quiet refuge that bore the traces of history in its depths. People worked not only to maintain their routines, but also to prepare for the inevitable. Items were packed carefully with a tenderness that spoke of both hope and grief. Standing tall against the backdrop of mountains, it tells a story not through words, but through presence, a story of change, loss, and the delicate balance between them. 8. It invites you to slow your breath, to soften your gaze, to sink into the gentle rhythm of water and wind. Stories were shared, some whispered late at night by candlelight, others spoken aloud in the village square. These stories were not just recollections, but acts of preservation, a way to hold the past close, even as the future loomed uncertain. Wildflowers bloom in hidden clearings, their delicate colors adding subtle splashes of life against the rugged stone. The air is thick with the scent of earth and growth, a heady mix that speaks of fertile soil and the promise of renewal. Its sound, now frozen in time beneath the lake's surface. Once carried across the valley like a gentle heartbeat, steady and reassuring, the plans to build the dam, to harness the power of the rushing waters, took on a more tangible form. The government's promises of progress and prosperity were heard. Yet in the village, a quiet tension lingered beneath the surface. The thought of losing their home was a heavy one, weighed down by memories, attachments, and the intimate knowledge that the land itself was part of who they were. The villagers would listen as the echoes faded into the night, their minds settling into the calm rhythm of rest. The sense of community is palpable here, woven into the very fabric of daily life. binding neighbors and friends in a shared rhythm. The first light spills gently over the rooftops, catching on the dew that clings to the grass and the cobblestones. A baker stokes the wood-fired oven, the comforting aroma of fresh bread beginning to mingle with the cool mountain air. The story of Graun, now resting beneath Lake Resia, is not only one of water and stone, but also of the people who lived in harmony with this land. Their lives were tied to the rhythms of the seasons, to the rise and fall of the sun, and to the quiet passage of time marked by the church bell, which, now silent, still seems to echo in the hearts of those who remember. In the early days before the waters claimed the valley, the community was a tapestry of simple, steady routines. Children awaken slowly, their footsteps light and unhurried as they make their way to school or to help their families with daily chores. The landscape itself is an ever-present companion. Towering peaks rise around the valley, their snow-capped summits reflecting the changing moods of the sky. As the day unfolds, the villagers move with purpose but without haste. Mealtime offers moments of gathering and reflection. Imagine a family seated around a sturdy wooden table, the surface worn smooth by years of use. Evenings are marked by the steady tolling of the church bell, calling the community to moments of quiet prayer or reflection. But as the years passed, change came slowly, yet inexorably. During those final months before the flood, life in Graun took on a new texture. Imagine standing on a hillside overlooking the village during this time, the air cool and still. Then, as the waters began to rise, the valley transformed into a place suspended between worlds. In the seasons that followed, nature embraced the new lake, weaving it seamlessly into the surrounding landscape. Visitors drawn by the lake's beauty often pause at the shore, their footsteps soft against the pebbles. The steeple itself has become a beacon, a quiet monument that invites contemplation. And so, as night falls over Lake Resia, the world seems to hold its breath in peaceful reverence. As the shadows deepen and the night sky grows dense with stars, the lake's surface mirrors the quiet vastness above. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of the water, the cool breeze whispering softly through the trees, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The people of Graun, though displaced, carried their history like a quiet ember glowing softly in the night. Their stories passed down through generations. Came a gentle song of remembrance, soft and unhurried, much like the lapping waves against the submerged stones. The stillness here is profound, filled with gentle sounds that soothe and steady the mind. This quietness is not emptiness, but a rich tapestry of life moving at its own unhurried pace. Water lilies floated where gardens once bloomed, their pale petals unfolding in the soft light like whispers of a vanished world. Fish swam among the submerged rooftops, their scales catching the filtered sunlight in shimmering flashes. They pause, drawn by the serene beauty and the quiet mystery of the submerged village. The water takes on hues of rose and violet, reflecting the clouds as they drift slowly overhead. The steeple stands out starkly against this backdrop, its silhouette crisp and unwavering. The village may be submerged, but its essence flows in the currents. In the rustling leaves and the cool breath of the mountain air, the routines marked by the passage of seasons and the tolling of the bell. Their legacy is not lost, but lives on softly beneath the lake's glassy surface, a gentle song that carries on through time. It invites you to listen, to slow your thoughts, and to find peace in the steady, enduring rhythm of nature. The air is cool and carries the faint scent of pine needles and damp earth, grounding you in the moment. Some come seeking solitude, others driven by curiosity, but all leave touched by the gentle melancholy that lingers Hera, feeling that life is both fragile and enduring, transient yet eternal. Trees once rooted in earth now stood like silent sentinels, their trunks reaching upward through the cool depths. Beneath this calm exterior lies the story of resilience and memory, woven into the fabric of the village's legacy. The boundary between past and present blurred, inviting contemplation rather than action. It is a place to breathe deeply, to let the mind wander softly across the space between memory and forgetting. In those early days after the valley was flooded, the villagers faced the vast unknown with a mixture of sorrow and hope. The moon rises slowly, its glow spreading a silvery sheen over the lake. The quiet is broken only by the gentle lapping of water and the distant hoot of an owl, sounds that seem to cradle the world in a gentle embrace. Imagine the solemn gatherings where families stood together, their voices low and steady, recalling the landmarks of their lives, the old mill by the river, The bakery with its wood-fired oven, the schoolhouse filled with laughter and learning. Each memory a fragile thread tying them to a world now submerged beneath the lake's tranquil surface. The church steeple, rising alone above the water, became a powerful symbol. It was a reminder of endurance, a silent witness to the passage of time and the tides of change. Some said the bell, forever silent, carried the echoes of prayers long spoken, its voice mingling with the rustle of the trees and the sigh of the wind. Others found in its steadfast presence a source of comfort, a steady marker in a landscape transformed. Life adapted as it always does, and new rhythms emerged around the lake. Fishermen learned the moods of the water, casting their nets where the sun caught the ripples, just so, moving with patient ease. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Spring's gentle thaw, summer's warm embrace, autumn's crisp breath, and winter's silent white cloak. Each brought its own quiet beauty, a reminder that even in loss, life persists. The village's transformation beneath the lake created a unique harmony between nature and memory. In this watery realm, time seemed to slow, folding gently over itself like the ripples on the lake's surface. Visitors arriving at Lake Resia often find themselves caught in this delicate balance. Imagine the lake at dusk, when the sky blazes briefly with color before fading into twilight. As darkness deepens, the stars begin to emerge, each one a soft point of light in the vast velvet sky. The story of Graun beneath Lake Resia is a reminder of how places hold memory even when transformed. So as you rest here in this tranquil moment, imagine the lives that once filled the valley, their joys and quiet struggles. As the years settled quietly over the waters of Lake Resia, the memory of the village of Graun lived on. It's not only in the hearts of those who had been uprooted, but also in the gentle whispers of the landscape itself. Imagine standing once more by the lake's edge. The early morning mist softening the outlines of the mountains, and the still waters reflecting the pale light of dawn. The air is cool and crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the faint sweetness of wildflowers tucked beneath the trees. This delicate moment feels suspended in time, much like the village beneath the lake, caught forever between what was and what remains. The decision to flood the valley, driven by the promise of progress and power generation, brought with it a deep unease. They brought with them the traditions and stories of the village, sharing them gently like a treasured lullaby. It invites those who visit to slow their thoughts, to listen to the rhythms of nature, and to find peace in the quiet. It is a reminder that even when landscapes change, the stories we carry remain alive, breathing softly in the spaces between water and sky. For those who come here, the lake offers a moment to step away from the rush of modern life and find solace in a simpler, slower rhythm. The scent of fallen leaves and the crispness of the air invite a slower pace, as if the world itself is preparing to rest. It is here that the rhythm of life, though transformed, continues in an unbroken cycle, steady and sure, and winter transforms the landscape into a silent wonderland. Snow blankets the mountains and shores, the lake sometimes frozen, a mirror of white and pale blue. The creation of the reservoir was born from a desire to harness energy, to fuel growth and change. Yet it also came at a cost. A small village submerged, a community uprooted. The bell tower's silhouette grows darker against the fading light, and the water reflects this quiet transition. As the evening deepens, the air cools, and the world seems to hold its breath in anticipation of night. No. In this moment, the village beneath the lake rests, suspended in time, a peaceful memory wrapped in the embrace of nature. These truths coexist quietly beneath the surface, as layered and complex as the waters themselves. In listening to the gentle sounds of the lake, you might feel a sense of calm settle over you. It is a calm born of history, nature, and the quiet resilience of a place that has endured through change. Its feeling soft and steady is the heart of Lake Resia's story, the sleeping city beneath the water. Alive in memory and in the rhythm of the natural world, the bell tower stands resolute, an ancient guardian in this serene, frozen world. Imagine dipping your hand into the cool water, feeling its smooth surface, and sensing the hidden structures beneath silent homes. The old village church, the bell tower reaching skyward. Gathered around fires or in quiet rooms, these stories wove a bridge between past and present, a soft reminder that home is as much in memory and spirit as it is in place. It is not a tale of simple loss or triumph, but one of transformation and remembrance. In the steady, calm way of the lake, we find an invitation to honor the past while gently embracing the present. The promises made to those who would be displaced were fragile, and the loss of homeland was a quiet sorrow carried in the hearts of many. Imagine the last farewell, the slow dismantling of homes, the final walk through empty streets, the lingering gaze upon a landscape forever altered. In this peaceful hush, the story of the bell tower, the heart of the submerged town, draws closer to us. In spring, the surrounding forests awaken with fresh green leaves and blossoms, the air filled with the gentle buzz of insects and the calls of returning birds. Summer stretches long and warm, sunlight dancing across the water's surface, while families picnic along the shores, their laughter blending softly with the natural chorus. Its stoic silhouette is a solitary figure against the vastness of the lake, and it holds more than just architectural significance. The tower is a symbol, a keeper of memory, a silent witness to the passage of human hopes and losses. Imagine the layers of history embedded in its weathered stones, each one touched by countless seasons of sun, snow, and rain. Though the bell itself has long ceased to toll, the tower's presence seems to echo a quiet, unspoken song of resilience. The villagers displaced by the flooding carried with them a tapestry of memories woven from the fabric of daily life. The rhythm of the seasons, the festivals celebrated in the village square, the sound of children's laughter, the familiar smells of freshly baked bread and wood smoke drifting through narrow streets, the early morning light filtering through misty air, the smell of dew on grass, and the gentle hum of activity as villagers began their daily routines. Farmers tending to cattle and pastures, artisans crafting tools and goods in small workshops, families gathering around hearths for morning meals. The cadence of life was steady and familiar, marked by a closeness to nature and each other. These recollections became a quiet comfort for those far from home, a way to preserve the essence of Graun even as its physical form rested beneath the tranquil surface of the lake. It is worth pausing to imagine a single day in that village before the waters came. Yet beneath this calm exterior, there was an undeniable sense of change looming on the horizon. In the years that followed, the people who once called Graun home forged new lives in nearby towns and cities. The lake itself, with its glassy surface and hidden depths, became a place of reflection, not just in the literal sense, but in the deeper, more contemplative way. This connection between memory and nature forms the core of Lake Resia's enduring story. There is also something deeply comforting about the way the seasons embrace the lake. Each one brings a new layer of quiet beauty. Autumn paints the trees in shades of amber and gold, a warm contrast to the cool blue of the lake. To imagine this place in winter is to feel the embrace of stillness and quietude, a perfect moment to breathe deeply, to let the mind wander gently across the snowy expanse, and to rest in the peace of the season. As we sit beside the lake in this gentle moment, it is worth reflecting on the delicate balance between human ambition and the natural world. This story encourages us to slow down and consider the ways in which progress shapes our lives and landscapes. Imagine now the lake at twilight, the sky painted in soft hues of lavender and rose. If you imagine yourself here at the water's edge, breathing in the cool air. As the twilight deepens into night, the surface of Lake Resia becomes a glassy canvas, reflecting the stars that begin to pepper the darkening sky. The village beneath remains silent, but it is far from forgotten. Beneath the still waters, the outlines of old rooftops, narrow streets, and familiar corners lie cradled in quiet repose, their stories folded into the layers of sediment and time. Imagine families carefully packing their belongings, tenderly salvaging heirlooms and cherished keepsakes. Picture the last gatherings at village squares, where neighbors exchanged embraces and whispered farewells beneath skies heavy with unspoken sorrow. Though the bell itself no longer rings, the tower's silhouette against the horizon seems to pulse with a silent heartbeat. Some say that on certain quiet nights, when the wind is just right, the faint toll of the bell can still be heard, carried softly across the water. Whether these tales are true or born from the collective yearning of a displaced community, they add to the rich texture of the lake's history. These stories offer comfort, a bridge between what was lost and what remains. Imagine it as a beacon for those who remember, a gentle reminder that the past is always near, just beneath the surface of present days. It asks us to consider how we hold on to the past, how we adapt to new realities, and how nature and human stories intertwine. There is comfort in the knowledge that even beneath water and silence, life continues, different, transformed, yet enduring. It is a place to find solace, a story to carry gently as you drift into sleep. Steady footsteps of children as they walked away from the only homes they had ever known. The final echoes of church bells that once called the faithful to prayer, now silence beneath the waves. Feel the calm seep into your limbs, the steady pulse of the lake's quiet energy. The story of the sleeping city becomes a soft murmur in your mind, a gentle lullaby guiding you toward rest. These moments were heavy with emotion, but also marked by a profound resilience. Imagine yourself walking along the shore as the sun dips low, the water glowing with warm hues of orange and pink. In winter, when the ice forms a solid sheet, it becomes possible to walk across the lake itself, to tread softly above the sleeping city. Each step across this frozen expanse carries a sense of reverence, as if honoring the lives and stories held just beneath. The gentle lapping of waves against the rocks provides a soothing rhythm, a natural lullaby that encourages slow breaths and calm thoughts. Nearby, the pine trees swayed gently in the breeze, their needles whispering secrets of the forest. The scent of damp earth and fresh water fills the air, grounding you in this peaceful moment. Imagine yourself gazing across this tranquil expanse, the cool air carrying a faint chill.
Ow!
A reminder of the mountain heights surrounding this peaceful place. The lake and its submerged village invited gentle contemplation, as if inviting you to rest alongside its stillness. The rhythm of the natural world continues around the lake seasons turning, wildlife stirring, days blending softly into nights. In this gentle cycle, the submerged village is not forgotten, but folded quietly into the landscape. It lives on in the stories shared by those who remember, in the steady presence of the bell tower, and in the calm waters that mirror the sky. The story of Graun's submersion is not simply one of water overtaking land. It is a narrative of intertwined lives and slow transitions, a blend of loss and adaptation. The villagers who once called this place home were deeply connected to the land and to each other. Their lives moved with the rhythm of the seasons, the flow of the nearby streams, and the cycles of planting and harvest. The decision to flood the valley, made with visions of harnessing nature's power for modern use, brought a sudden interruption to this ancient rhythm. Yet even in the face of upheaval, there was a quiet dignity to the community's response. In the years after the flooding, the submerged village became a silent witness to the passage of time. The waters that had once covered it reflected the changing sky, the dance of clouds, and the soft glow of the moon. Winter's frost would crystallize upon the frozen lake, offering a smooth, glimmering surface that invited quiet footsteps and hushed exploration.
Ow.
Summer brought warmth and life to the shores, where wildflowers bloomed and dragonflies hovered lazily in the sunbeams. Throughout each season, the bell tower stood resolute, a lone sentinel reaching upward, its stonework softened by moss and time. This solitary tower, visible even in winter when the lake sometimes froze solid, has come to embody the spirit of the lost village. Local stories have grown around the lake and its bell tower, weaving a tapestry of legend and memory. For visitors to the lake today, the experience is both tranquil and evocative. The lake's surface sometimes reveals glimpses of the submerged world below faint outlines, shadows cast by forgotten walls. It is a place that invites reflection on the passage of time and the resilience of memory. The history of Lake Resia and the village of Graun offers a unique meditation on change and continuity. Imagine closing your eyes now, breathing deeply, and allowing yourself to drift into the soothing embrace of this place. This lake, with its hidden village and timeless bell tower, is a reminder that even when things change beyond recognition, some things remain. Memory, resilience, and the peaceful cadence of nature's rhythms. As dawn stretches its soft fingers across the sky, the light begins to seep gently over the tranquil waters of Lake Resia, the bell tower. Rising like a silent sentinel, catches the earliest glow, its weathered stones warmed by the touch of morning. The world feels still and expectant, wrapped in a quiet promise that today, as with every day, The lake will cradle its secrets beneath a glassy surface, and the sleeping city below will rest undisturbed. Imagine yourself standing here, the cool air brushing lightly against your skin, the faint scent of pine and fresh water mingling with the crispness of dawn. This moment, suspended in peaceful time, offers a perfect opening to the final chapter of our story. Imagine the slow unraveling of familiar rhythms as families prepared to leave, the measured packing of cherished belongings, the heartfelt farewells whispered in quiet corners. Some come seeking quiet reflection, drawn by the peaceful rhythm of the water and the soft embrace of the surrounding mountains. Others come to trace the outlines of a vanished way of life, to imagine the lives beneath the waves, and to honor the resilience of those who adapted to new beginnings. The landscape that had been a constant companion through generations would soon be transformed irrevocably. Change is inevitable, but it is also cyclical and renewing. Imagine small waves caressing the shore, the warmth of sunlight filtering through leafy branches, and the quiet murmur of life all around. Dragonflies dart over the water, their iridescent wings catching the light, while fish glide beneath the surface, their movements slow and graceful. The harmony of these moments encourages a deep, steady breath, a slowing of the pace, and an opening of the heart to the serene beauty of this place. The sleeping city rests, not forgotten, but remembered, a constant thread woven through the fabric of the mountains, the water, and the sky. The village beneath the water may have vanished from sight, but it lives on in the steady pulse of the landscape. In the gentle rise and fall of the lake's surface, and in the enduring silhouette of the bell tower, yet within this upheaval lay a steadfast hope that the essence of their village, spirit and stories, would endure beyond the physical loss. The story of Graun and its quiet transformation beneath the waters is, in many ways, a reflection on the enduring balance between loss and renewal. It invites you to rest in its calm, to let the rhythms of the lake soothe your thoughts and guide you gently toward peace. In this story, there is no hurry, no urgency, only the steady, comforting cadence of time and tide. The decision to flood the valley to create a hydroelectric reservoir brought profound change, yet it also set in motion a new kind of life, one woven delicately between the natural world and human memory. You are joined by countless others who have walked this path before you, have gazed upon the bell tower and listened to the silent stories beneath the water. Together, in this shared stillness, there is a connection that spans time and space, a gentle reminder that even in change, we are not alone. Imagine walking along the lake shore in early autumn, the air crisp with the promise of winter, and the trees around you blazing with amber and gold. The soft rustle of leaves underfoot, the faint scent of wood smoke drifting on a distant breeze, the gentle call of birds settling in for the night. All these details invite a slowing of the mind and a softening of the heart. The lake reflects the fiery colors of the season, a mirror of transition and transformation. Though the bell is not tolled for decades, its presence still echoes softly in the minds of those who look upon it. The bell tower emerges from the snow like a timeless sentinel, stark against the white expanse. Imagine the crisp, clean scent of snow and pine, the sharp crunch of footsteps on frozen ground, and the enveloping quiet that soothes the soul. This frozen landscape is a perfect place for contemplation, a place where the mind can wander gently through memories and dreams. Memory, like the lake, has depths that are both mysterious and calming. Some recollections shimmer like sunlit ripples on the surface, bright, fleeting, and vivid. Others lie deeper, wrapped in the quiet shadows, waiting patiently to be discovered and held close. The submerged village is a physical reminder that memory is not lost when things change. It simply takes on new forms. It becomes part of the landscape, a gentle undercurrent that flows beneath the surface of everyday life. It stands as a quiet testimony to the lives once lived beneath its shadow, to the homes that were lovingly tended, to the laughter and tears that filled the village streets. Imagine the thousands of small stories, like drops of water, gathering quietly in the collective memory, each one a testament to the strength of a community bound by shared experience. As the years passed, the lake grew to become more than a body of water. It became a living monument to resilience and remembrance. The bell tower, solitary and unyielding, has come to symbolize this delicate balance, It is worth reflecting on the nature of memory itself as we linger here. For those who once called Graun home, the transition was neither swift nor easy. In the years since, the lake and its bell tower have drawn visitors not only for their striking beauty, but also for the poignant history they represent. The landscape around Lake Resia offers a gentle harmony between nature and memory. Winter brings a deeper stillness. When frost blankets the mountains and the lake freezes over in icy silence, the world seems to hold its breath. Throughout the seasons, the rhythms of nature around Lake Resia carry a calming message. As the sun moves higher in the sky and the day unfolds, the lake draws you into its timeless dance. The story of Graun is one of many layers of people and place of loss and remembrance, of nature's enduring embrace. As you imagine yourself here, beside the sleeping city under the lake, there is a sense of quiet companionship. This is the lasting gift of Lake Resia, and the village it holds beneath its surface, a place where history and nature blend into a soothing lullaby for the soul. As the day unfolds fully, and the sun casts a warm golden light across the serene surface of Lake Resia, there is a gentle invitation to pause and reflect on the deeper meaning woven through this quiet place. The story of the submerged village is more than a tale of water, though the waters now conceal the village streets. The spirit of Graun lingers, tucked gently beneath the waves. Their stories of laughter, of work, of family, continue to resonate not only in the memories passed down by descendants, but in the very rhythms of the lake and mountains. The ebb and flow of water mirror the passing seasons and the cycles of life that once shaped this community. The trails are lined with wildflowers and the soft carpet of moss, inviting slow footsteps and soft sighs of contentment. It is a symbol of endurance, standing firm despite the changes that have swept over the valley, though its bell remains silent. The tower's presence continues to speak volumes, a reminder that some things endure beyond the reach of time and tide. It invites you to imagine the gentle sounds that might rise from below, the soft creaking of timber, the faint murmur of water against stone. The whispered memories of a place that once was and will always be. These imaginings are a soothing balm, a tender connection across time that allows the past to gently fold into the present. The lake mirrors the heavens, a dark glass dotted with starlight. While the bell tower stands silhouetted against the vast sky, the air cools and the peacefulness deepens, inviting you to sink further into calmness and rest. May its gentle tale bring you peace and restful sleep. It is a place to find solace, to let go of restless thoughts, and to embrace the gentle passage into sleep. Imagine tracing your fingers along its cool, rough stones, feeling the texture worn smooth by wind and rain, touched by the hands of countless generations. As you close your eyes, may you carry with you the calm spirit of this place, the slow, steady rhythm of nature, and the comforting knowledge that beneath still waters, stories sleep peacefully, ready to be awakened in dreams. The sound of the breeze rustling through the trees forms a soothing melody, a gentle song that invites rest and reflection. This landscape holds a timeless quality, a stillness that beckons you to breathe deeply, to feel grounded, and to let go of the day's concerns. It is a reminder that endings are often beginnings in disguise, and that beneath loss there is fertile ground for renewal. It is as though the village sleeps beneath a soft blanket of water, resting from the hustle of the world above, yet alive in a more subtle way. The sky takes on gentle shades of lavender and rose reflected in the shimmering water. Shadows lengthen, and the world seems to slow even further. It reminds us that even when places change beyond recognition, the essence of what was there endures. It lives in memory, in nature, and in the quiet moments of contemplation like these. The sleeping city under Lake Resia is a gentle echo of human tenacity and the enduring beauty of the world's quiet corners. It is a time of quiet magic when the boundary between day and night blurs, and the mind drifts easily between wakefulness and rest. Each stone, each corner, each arch in the submerged buildings holds whispers of lives once lived, echoes of footsteps long since silenced, but never forgotten, and stone. It is a meditation on impermanence, memory, and the subtle ways in which life continues, even beneath the surface of things. Imagine yourself standing by the shore once more, the gentle breeze brushing softly against your face, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and pine. The lake's stillness seems to breathe with a quiet wisdom, encouraging your thoughts to slow and your heart to open. The bell tower, weathered but steadfast, remains the guardian of stories both known and untold. Imagine the villagers themselves, now part of the broader tapestry of this landscape. The lake itself has become a sanctuary for wildlife and a refuge for nature's gentle rhythms. Picture herons standing gracefully along the shorelines, their reflections wavering in the water. Fish dart below the surface, weaving through submerged ruins, their movements slow and elegant. Dragonflies skim lightly over the lake, their iridescent wings catching the sunlight in fleeting flashes. The natural world thrives here in quiet harmony, weaving new stories atop the old, gently rewriting the history etched beneath the waves. Walking along the paths that skirt the lake, one can almost feel the layered presence of past and present blending. The bell tower itself, rising like a timeless beacon, draws the eye and the spirit alike. As the afternoon light fades into the soft hues of evening, the lake transforms once again. In these moments, the sleeping city beneath the lake feels near just out of sight, but palpably present. The story of Graun's submersion, though marked by loss, is ultimately one of resilience and continuity. As night settles, imagine the stars beginning to twinkle overhead, their light soft and distant. This is the final quiet note of our Tela lullaby carried on the winds over Lake Resia, whispered beneath the waves that hold a village in eternal slumber. Thank you for sharing this journey to the sleeping city beneath Lake Resia.